it's Jono, and welcome back to another episode of Treknalysis. Alright, I know I just said I've been talking a lot of TNG lately, but I promise I have a good reason for once again talking about yet another TNG episode. Last week I talked about the DS9 Season 2 episode Cardassians, which is about a bitter custody battle over Rugal, a Cardassian war orphan, between his adoptive Bajoran parents and his biological Cardassian father. And if you haven't watched that video, you should definitely check it out. It sparks a lot of discussion over what's best for young Rugal. Should he have stayed with his adoptive parents who raised him most of his life, or return to his biological father who he doesn't even remember? But a couple of people brought up a similar TNG episode, Suddenly Human. What's it about? Roughly the same thing, only it's a human boy brought up in an alien culture. And I wanted to talk about this episode to compare how the two shows handled this kind of situation. Once again, we're delving into more alien culture shock and a battle over a teenage boy, with the addition of Wesley getting a face full of ice cream and Picard facing his toughest battle yet. Parenting a teenage boy.
Then you are the only one who can help him. It's up to you, Captain.
But before I go further, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I talk a lot about Star Trek, video games, and whatever else I feel like talking about. And if you'd like to help support the channel, consider becoming a member. Be great to have you aboard. The Enterprise receives a distress call from a Talarian craft. It's adrift in space, and there appears to be a radiation leak. Seems like a no-brainer, right? After all, the Enterprise is full of the do-gooders of the galaxy, so of course they'll help them out.
Common tactic of the Talarians to abandon their observation craft, rig them to self-destruct.
And issue a general distress call.
Oof! Talk about the Talarian craft who cried distress call, am I right?
You should never tell the same lie twice.
Well, there's no way to tell if it's really a booby trap or not, but there is a regular Talarian craft on its way over, so that's a good sign.
There is life on board, and it's fading.
Wait! Do my eyes deceive me? Is Troy actually being helpful? Let's give it up for our counselor, ladies and gentlemen. She actually proved her worth this week. So an away team is beamed over to the ship, and it really was a distress call. Sent out by teenagers. This is a basic training ship, and all 5 Talarian cadets are in need of medical attention. Seems pretty cut and dry.
This boy, he's human.
Well, that's different. This is Jono, the only human on the Talarian ship, and Beverly is painstakingly trying to make conversation with him while treating his wounds, only for Jono to remain silent.
I have a son not much older than you. Perhaps you'd like to meet him.
That's not sweetening the deal, Beverly.
I think the other children were a little intimidated by him.
Also, for some reason, Jono reminds me of Jonathan Brandis. Granted, this episode aired a few years before he was cast in seaQuest DSV, but he would have been the right age for the role, and I can see him pulling it off. But anyways, while Beverly is treating Jono, suddenly the silence breaks. Picard enters sickbay and manages to get the Talarians, and Jono's, attention by awkwardly clapping. He does have a knack for that. The clapping was just enough for Jono to respond and demand that he be returned home to Endar, his captain. However, Beverly's medical scans reveal some alarming results. Fractured ribs, a broken arm, and even a low-grade concussion and possible neurological impairment. And it all happened in the last 7 years, most likely after Jono was taken in by the Talarians. And because the Talarians have a history of being particularly brutal to their enemies, Beverly suspects that Jono might have been brutalized by them.
Isn't it possible that the injuries were caused prior to his captivity?
Not likely.
Pause. Let's go back to my DS9 video for a moment. Rugal's parents were accused, without proof mind you, of abusing Rugal as revenge against the Cardassians. And the mere accusation was enough for Rugal to be taken away from his father. And my complaint about that was the lack of actual proof and no attempt to give Rugal an exam or even a counseling session. Heck, he seemed fine with his father and even admitted that he was never hit.
My parents have never done anything wrong to me.
Here, there is already evidence that Jono may have been, or is even still, being abused. Granted, it's possible he could have gotten those injuries in other ways, but Beverly did her due diligence here. The proper steps are being taken to remove Jono from a possibly dangerous situation. Heck, she even points out that just asking Jono might not be enough because Stockholm Syndrome might have set in. This is already off to a better start than Rugal's situation. Meanwhile,
I just suggested he take off his gloves. Suddenly he lost control.
the ship's counselor, ladies and gents!
Well played, Counselor.
Well, Picard tells Jono to cut it out, and Jono complies pretty quickly. Clearly, he has respect for Picard. But Worf still has to confine him to quarters per Dr. Crusher's orders. Now, you would think Worf and Jono would maybe have something in common. After all, they're both warriors. Surely they—
Why do you take orders from a female?
Oh ho ho, we're playing that game, are we? Wonder how he'd react to Captain Janeway.
No.
So Worf's out, since the Talarians are a patriarchal society where men always outrank women, and both the show's female main characters outrank him. So I guess that leaves Picard, who can't stand to be around children.
I would appreciate it if you could keep me from making an ass of myself with children.
I think it should be you, Captain.
Oh no, Counselor. Oh no, Counselor.
This is Picard's own personal hell. Jono's real name is Jeremiah Rosa, and his parents were killed during a Talarian attack on his home of Galen 4 when he was just a boy. He has 2 living grandparents, his grandma being an admiral, who would be thrilled to have him stay with them. However, the Enterprise can't send Jono to live with his grandparents just yet. Troy expresses concerns that it would be a difficult experience for all of them, and that Jono needs to rediscover his identity as a human in order for it to work. Yes! Let's pause again for a moment and go back to Cardassians. I had a problem with Rugal being immediately sent to Cardassia with his biological father, since Rugal spent most of his life raised as a Bajoran with a strong disdain for Cardassians. At the very least, they should have worked with Rugal so he had some chance of success adapting to life on Cardassia. Here, the proper precautions are being taken with Jono. We can't just send him off to his grandparents because—
Jono!
Troy, that's another point for you. You're making some good points this episode. Picard wants Troy to handle all of this, but considering Jono doesn't respect women and having Riker mentor him might have the wrong effect—
You are the heart in my day and the soul in my night.
I don't think this is my style.
that leaves the responsible Captain Picard. And he's dreading the whole thing.
But I find that I would rather fight 10 Baldock warriors than face one small child.
I'm dead. Jono!
Picard attempts to get to know Jono, but Jono's not thrilled with his quarters. After all, he always lived with his captain.
Yes, well, that wouldn't work here.
So Jono's moving into Picard's quarters.
I'm not a family man, Riker, and yet Starfleet has given me a ship with children aboard.
When you're babysitting and the kid starts touching all your stuff. Picard does manage to get some info out of him, though. The howling, they do that when they're distressed. The gloves, so he doesn't have to touch an alien. But then Picard asks about Endar and whether he ever caused Jono pain.
Pain is not a consideration.
I'm sorry, what?
Pain is not what matters. Passing the test is everything.
This doesn't sound good at all, and Jono refuses to explain any of it. Picard's understandably feeling overwhelmed and out of his element, so he calls Troy to the ready room. Considering this is all her idea—
You're probably not aware of this, but I've never been particularly comfortable around children.
Really?
Look, Deanna, this man is no Mr. Rogers. He's much better off serving the ship as captain while someone else handles Jono. He's simply not the right person for the job.
When you were a child, did you have any friends?
Jeez, chill out, Deanna! Deanna's not buying any of it. After all, they've explored all over the galaxy, handled how many countless aliens. Heck, they even escaped the asteroid booby trap of death while Geordi was making kissy faces in the holodeck.
And yet when asked to assume a parental role, you cringe. Why do you suppose that is?
I'm not cringing.
You know, Deanna does have a point. After all, explain Wesley.
Get off the bridge, both of you.
Basically, Picard's entire childhood was prepping for Starfleet, something that even his father wasn't a fan of. So he really can't relate to kids. Too bad though, because Deanna's all buckle up, sunshine, you're gonna be a dad, and there's nothing you could do about it.
You're saying that's what I'm going to have to do?
Yes.
Deanna has no chill this episode. Okay, Jean-Luc, sure, you might not be the most qualified person on board, but I'm sure you'll get the hang of it in no time.
Computer! Turn off that noise!
See? You're a natural! Picard stopped by Jono's quarters to show him some baby pictures and pictures of his parents and ask him if he remembers any of it. To which Jono answers that he knows Endar rescued him. He told him so. Which isn't a direct answer at all. In fact, Jono's incredibly evasive when it comes to the Talarians and what they did on Galen 4 to his parents.
It was war. Death is part of war.
Yeah, I'd call that concerning. We're seeing the product of years of conditioning here. Meanwhile, Endar's ship has arrived, and with a quick Picard maneuver, Picard leaves for the bridge. However, the camera doesn't follow Picard, but remains fixed on Jono, who starts looking at the old photos of him and his parents. Clearly, Jono has some form of PTSD and should be talking to someone. No wonder he's being evasive. So Endar arrives and collects the injured Talarians, but Picard is all, hey, we found a human on board. Care to explain?
Perhaps you would care to explain why we are here.
And Endar's all, that's no human, he's my son! Endar beams on board to discuss Jono. Coincidentally, he was in charge of the Talarian forces that, repelled the trespassers on Galen 4. Endar found Jono next to his mother's body and took him in accordance with Talarian tradition. He lost his son at the hands of humans, so he gets to take one of theirs. Picard's, of course, none too pleased, since Endar should have reported it to the Federation in accordance with their agreement. Not to mention, the boy's been brutalized, which Endar denies.
Then explain the fractured ribs, concussion, broken arm.
This is no laughing matter, Endar. There's some pretty hefty evidence against you. The Federation will take kids away from their adoptive fathers for less. Endar claims Jono got these injuries trying to prove himself. Things like riding a powerful beast and working through pain during a competition with other youths like himself. Which I'd like to see proof of this alleged competition.
Have you ever been a father, Picard?
Who told you about Wesley?
I was always proud of you.
Picard insists that Jono should be returned to his human family since he's human. But Endar argues that he's long forgotten his heritage. And yeah, this sounds an awful lot like Rugal in DS9.
He's in Cardassian. He's Bajoran.
Here's the thing though. I argue that Rugal should have stayed with his Bajoran parents since he was brought up Bajoran and would have difficulty assimilating into Cardassian society. So I should, in theory, have the same argument in the case of Jono. But I don't. The difference between Rugal and Jono is that, one, Endar took Jono and didn't tell anyone, which was in violation of an agreement with the Federation, as opposed to Rugal being adopted by parents who didn't know the circumstances of his being in an orphanage. And two, Jono is in a far more dangerous situation. We only have Endar's word on how Jono sustained those injuries, and he has yet to prove that he's telling the truth. There is a much stronger case for Jono being removed from his adoptive family than for Rugal. But Endar isn't having any of it, and he's called for reinforcements and is ready to go to war.
You're saying that you are willing to go to war over this boy?
Would you not for your only son?
Have you met Wesley? But then then again, Endar's not exactly keen on going to war either, so he wants to see Jono so he can prove that he's been a good father to him. Which Beverly has an issue with.
Abusers can have subtle but powerful influence over their victims.
You see, I'm not convinced the boy has been abused, Doctor.
What are you basing that off of, Jean-Luc? Endar could be one hell of an actor and appear to be a concerned father. We haven't seen proof of the competition that Jono supposedly broke his arm at. Don't tell me Endar wouldn't have pictures of it in his wallet. You're kinda taking his word for it, and he hasn't really proven himself to be trustworthy yet. Troy, on the other hand, isn't exactly keen on sending Endar away since Jono is going through a delicate time right now, and they could end up losing his trust altogether. So they all agree to a supervised visit, and good lord, is that a rat tail? Is this really what we want for Jono? Now, to Endar's credit, he does talk in a soft tone to Jono, like a caring father would. But Jono is extremely hard to read in this scene. He's pretty stiff, and it's hard to figure out what he's really thinking and feeling. It's really tough figuring out what his relationship with Endar is. Jono, however, has reached the age of decision. He can decide if he wants to stay with the humans or return home with Endar, which he says he wants to return home. Though considering he's saying that to Endar, is he really free to say anything else? Remember what Beverly said.
Abusers can have subtle but powerful influence over their victims.
And maybe I'm wrong and it's absolutely nothing, but I'm just saying this might require further scrutiny. Meanwhile, on the bridge...
Is it worth it to go to war over a child?
You might not ask that, Lieutenant, if it was your child.
Have you met Alexander? Alright, that hasn't happened yet.
I don't want to be a warrior.
Jono gets a message from Grandma, who looks like an adorable old lady wearing an admiral's uniform. Which makes Jono put two and two together that Picard is actually outranked by a woman. Which kinda freaks him out a little bit. Everything's so strange to him here. He can't do the things that he does back home to relieve stress.
I feel like I'm gonna explode here! Ugh.
So Picard introduces him to Space Racquetball. You know, props to DS9 for including spring ball as a regular sport, otherwise this would have been a one-off thing. And for the ladies, Picard in a skin-tight suit.
And a damn sexy man.
Jono starts to have flashbacks of his mother's death during spring ball, until he finally breaks down on the floor and Picard comforts him. See, Picard would make a pretty decent father. He doesn't give himself enough credit.
Might have made a good father.
Jono feels weak for remembering his mother and feeling deep, very human emotions. But Picard comforts him that while he may feel this deep sadness now, he can also feel joy.
I think I will always feel like this.
So Jono smashes a banana split in Wesley's face and instantly feels better. Jono's really coming around. He's embracing his human side, he's laughing, he's got a new friend in Wesley. Well, there's always a downside to everything. He might even be on his way to joining up with his human family. Until he stabs Picard in the middle of the night. Weirdly enough, this isn't the first or last time that'll happen. Picard gets stabbed a lot in this show. Well, luckily, the damage was pretty minor and Picard's going to be fine. He has a chat with Stabby McGee, who's ready to be executed for attacking a captain. Picard, on the other hand, is far more interested in finding out why he did it. He was so happy a few hours ago. After all, he humiliated Wesley in front of everyone in 10 Forward. While Jono was happy, he began to feel massive guilt over betraying everything in his life as a Talarian, especially what Endar gave and taught him. He simply couldn't leave his old life behind. Meanwhile, Endar's about to attack, and Picard stumbles onto the bridge with Jono and accepts responsibility for everything. They were convinced that they could persuade Jono to stay with them and be reunited with his human family, but they failed to listen to his wants and needs to go home. So they're sending him home with Endar. Yeah, this ends up being yet another crap situation, and Picard and his crew did so many things right. This decision is even more frustrating to me than Rugel's. there was a much stronger case that Jono was in an abusive house and should be removed, and it's clear he has unresolved PTSD that resulted in flashbacks. And yet, Picard sends Jono back to a potentially dangerous situation anyways because Jono says he wants to go back home. Heck, can he even go back home now with these repressed memories resurfacing? Sure, a war is being prevented by sending him back with Endar, but at what cost? Now, I can give credit to Picard. He does take into account what Jono wants, something that should have been done with Rugal in DS9. But Picard takes it to an extreme in allowing Jono to go with Endar despite the evidence of possible abuse and psychological trauma. Obviously, it would have been difficult to investigate Endar further since he more than likely would be unwilling in addition to the time constraint and possible war looming. But this is another situation where I feel like this isn't what's best for the kid involved. Jono is about to leave to join Endar, but the episode does end on a somewhat heartfelt moment. Jono bids a final farewell to Picard by taking off his gloves, the thing keeping him from touching an alien, and touches foreheads with Picard, a heartfelt gesture among Talarians. And that was Suddenly Human. I basically said everything I needed to about Jono's situation and how it compared to Rugal's, and obviously, I'm not happy with the outcome. That being said, this isn't a terrible episode and does have some good moments, like Picard being a father figure and helping Jono rediscover his humanity, Beverly and Deanna actually doing something. Credit where credit is due, as much as I criticize how those characters are written, they did their due diligence. Though Deanna has no chill.
And you might be surprised at just how good you can be.
But like with Cardassians, the ending is extremely frustrating. This episode isn't as good as Cardassians, but it's not a bad hour of television. It's simply another one of those episodes of Trek where the ending isn't perfect.
He will return home. To the only home he's ever known.
So what do you think of Suddenly Human? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What did you think of the ending? Should Jono have stayed with Endar or gone home to his biological grandparents? Do you agree with my conclusions about Jono's situation, or do you have another opinion? And what are some of your favorite Star Trek dilemmas? Please, leave comments below and discuss. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Treknalysis. If you like what you see, why not give my video a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends! Until next time...
I'm not cringing.